Praise God. Thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate your interest and your participation by choosing us and by watching. We know that there's a lot of things other that you could watch, and we're glad that you have joined us tonight in looking at the second part of the book of Titus as we're studying the 13 love letters from Paul to you. And we're applying them to Titus, of course, as Paul is mentoring this young pastor on the island of Crete, and he is mentoring you and I as well. And we hope that you will receive something meaningful and edifying in tonight's study. Paul is encouraging the kind of Christian conduct and lifestyle that makes the Christian doctrine effective, and I'll use this next word very cautiously, attractive. I think consistency is attractive. I think that godly living is attractive. Sometimes people have experienced the appeal on a subconscious level. They say, I like you, I don't like your family values, I don't like the way you vote, I don't like what they do at your church, but I'm attracted to you. I like you for some reason. Well, one, you have the joy of the Lord. And joy is magnetic. People want to be around joyful people, and they want to be around consistent people. People that are living good lives according to the gospel. And so I use that attractive part very cautiously, but so it's effective. Paul's encouraging this kind of behavior and lifestyle that is effective by affecting other people. We are to be virally contagious. And with joy, peace, love, and the qualities that he is forming in Titus and hopefully in me and hopefully in you, we will be attractive. They'll want to know, what is different about you? What is different? It's not just politics. It's not just a conservative approach. There's something about you that is attractive. And so he is encouraging that. And so interestingly enough, in the second chapter of Titus, the first 10 verses deals with the adornment of the believer. Now my mind goes to gold and silver jewelry. I don't know about what you think adorning is, but are you with me? The adornment, bright and nice colors, fashionable clothing, jewelry, rings, different kinds and different ways in which to wear the gold and silver. And of course, that's not what Paul means at all. I'm completely off on a rabbit trail. Adornment deals with to put in proper arrangement. To put in proper arrangement. And that's what he's going to do here. He's going to put in arrangement that which is attractive and that which is effective. In contrast to the opposers of Titus, his response is this: speak healthy doctrine. Speak healthy doctrine. Be edifying in your speech. Be edifying in what you teach. Let someone else deal with the ugly negative stuff if that's necessary. You teach healthy doctrine. Get the diet of what you teach to be growth-oriented, to be nutritious in a spiritual fashion, and not too much on the carbs and the sugar. You know what I mean? Get some protein in there and make people think in the process of receiving what you teach. It also means to teach the solid truth, not things that are iffy, things that are marginally interpretive. Just shy away from that and save it for private discussion. In public, deal with the solid truth. That's the obvious presentation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. The ministry of the local church, he indicates, is to all groups of people. I see some problem with dividing people either by age or by gender. And okay, here's the women's group over here. But then in the women's group, there's going to be the young women, and there'll be the older women. And if you can keep them together. Now I know in a big church, You can't, but I wonder about these kind of divisions. I don't know that they're productive in the way in which they are meant to be. But we have different groups, and so Paul is not being divisive, or correctly, it's divisive. He's not being that way. He's not trying to divide people. He's trying to teach how to approach people of different identification. And so you'll have the choice here to decide whether you're going to appeal to the older set of instruction or the younger set. Yeah. So that's up to you. But know that here's what Paul is teaching. First to the older. He says the older ones need to be sober, and that refers specifically to the use and the overuse of wine. This is the alcohol reference. He also says, and using the Old English term grave. Now that sounds real serious and almost morose, doesn't it? This has to do with being dignified as opposed to being gloomy. And I'll add my own word in here to that dignified, kind of classy. Dignified. Not just, so common that you're not special and not gloomy in your attitude and approach. Temperate, he says. And this is, of course, by now, if you're in the older group, and unfortunately I am. I don't know if you are, but I don't like this one. But I have to look around and see that I'm in the older group. By now, your behavior needs to be self-controlled. Because there may not be some elders that are older than you to step in and help correct you. You need to have learned by now to self-correct, to identify, without being defensive, your own problems, your own mistakes, your own out-of-balance elements, and know what to do about it. Advise yourself in these things. It's a self-discipline. Self-controlled behavior is important. And he says we need to be sound. That means healthy. Healthy in faith. Our faith needs to be increasing, and our faith needs to be stronger. One man put it this way: in 5 years, you'll be the same person you are now, except for the books you read and the people you meet. Those two elements, the books you read and the people you meet. If you don't meet any new people that substantially affect you in some way, and you don't read any books, in 5 years, you're going to be just about the person you are right now. And that's sad. You don't want to be. In 5 years from now, you want to be stronger. You want to have a bigger, stronger, more robust faith, not to believe for a dozen Cadillacs in the driveway. That's not the kind of faith I'm talking about, but the faith in depth of the appreciation of Jesus Christ and the salvation that he has provided for you. He also says in love, sound or healthy in love. This is driven by compassion, not by fault finding. Tell me how much skill, how much talent, how much education a person needs to find fault. Boy, I'm telling you, everybody's qualified. Everybody's qualified. And that has to be stifled by a knowing, not an overlooking of problems that exist, but an overriding compassion. Sympathy is one thing. Jesus is never described as having sympathy. Very interesting, isn't it? It always says that he looked on the crowd with compassion. I'll give you an illustration. I was born and raised in Alaska, and the winter is dark. Sometimes it's snowy. Sometimes it's pretty cold. It's colder than you can imagine. And I am driving home from church one day. It's dark. Now, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's dark already. The roads are 2-lane. It's snowing like crazy. It's like maybe what you experience with a cloud burst, and you know how rain comes down fast and hard and serious, and it was snowing about that speed. It is just coming down in a blinding fashion. It's coming so fast, the big flakes of snow, and suddenly there's a man pulled over to the side of the road. There's no shoulder. Very dangerous. He's just kind of pulled over a little bit, and he's got a flat tire. Oh man, the wind is blowing. It's snowing like crazy. It's dark, and he could easily be hit and have a flat tire turned into a major accident, maybe even serious injury. As I go around him and I review the conditions that he is saddled with, I have sympathy. Oh man, that is tough. Oh man, I'm glad I don't have a flat tire tonight. Oh, mercy. If I have compassion, it goes beyond sympathy. It sees the same situation, but there is a need and a movement within me to do something about it. And that's what Jesus had as perspective. He saw people's need. He saw they needed to be healed. They needed to be fed. But he didn't have superficial sympathy. He had compassion. He was moved in his spirit to do something about their condition. And he always is. If I have compassion for the man with a flat tire, I pull my 4-wheel drive vehicle over. I get out in the snow and I say, "Brother, can I help you? Can I take you somewhere? Can I tow your truck to the service station?" This is an act of compassion. I'll put it this way, and it'll seem a little bit mean on the surface. Sympathy's kind of cheap. You can have sympathy and it not cost you any work, any trouble, any effort, any money. I can sympathize for you and walk away and feel good about myself because I had some kind of a stirring of goodness toward you. But if I have the Jesus element of compassion, I will let that sympathy attraction turn into compassion based from my heart that I want to do something about this situation. I want to help you. I want to make it different. I want to pray for your healing. I want to help you. And so that's what he says for the older ones in their faith. It's to be increasing and stronger, but their love to be expressed in compassion, not fault finding. Oh, I see that hand. Oh, I see that flat tire. Oh, I see that need of hunger and babies that are hungry. And oh, yeah, tomorrow if I remember, we'll pray for you. Let's do something about it, those of us that are older. And then he lists also patience. And this is an indication in an active way of bearing more and more. That as our patience grows, and you understand that praying for patience has to be done with great thought and care. Because if you pray for patience, you're going to have tribulation. Because that's what trains you. And so as we receive more patience and we grow in that aspect of the fruit of the Spirit, and it is a fruit of the Spirit. It is part of the proof. Let me go into a personal definition here. I think patience as the fruit of the Spirit may be the most powerful demonstration of strength that you will ever see. Patience is not passive. Patience is strength. You can bear something. You can bear up under it. And in this case, for the older ones of us, he wants patience to bear more and more. As your patience grows, as the Spirit of God in your life exhibits more patience in your life, you are able to be loaded with more burden. Don't see that as some kind of divine punishment. Well, what did I do wrong to have this kind of a test and tribulation? Nothing. God's training you to bear something heavy. And He needs those that can bear more and more, not less and less. I've had people come to my office as pastor and ask for prayer that their life be made easier. Well, friend, you've come to the wrong man. I'm not praying that. Because you know what? If we pray for God to make your life easier, and He answers, you know what's going to happen? 6 weeks from now, you're going to come back to my office and go, let's do that again. It's gotten easier, but, I need it to get easier than it is now. And by the time we get done in 6 or 8 months, if a warm wind comes through, you will have the spine of a bowl of Jell-O, and you will not be able to tolerate any kind of resistance or problem whatsoever. On the contrary, if we pray together and I ask God to keep those things in place in your life, but to make you stronger, to create an overcomer in spirit and in substance in your life, to where you climb on the obstacles in your path, you overcome them, and you come back in 6 weeks and go, God answered the prayer and I'm stronger and I can deal with my situation now. Let's pray again because I would like to be even stronger. There is a day coming when you're going to need to be strong. And praying for an easier road, an easier life, and for God to let up on His program of loading you with burdens of all sorts. You're going to need to be strong in the day of testing and the day when you need power. Paul lists now those that are younger. And let's just say all of us are going to identify with that for a moment. We'll just think that we're younger, and he wants you to be discreet. And that has to do with a self-controlled conversation. No wonder you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Don't speak everything you know. Don't be a sieve. I have a couple of friends, and if I want a public declaration, if I want it spread on Facebook, if I want everybody in the church to know, I just have to tell one person. And I'm telling you, the distribution is, wow, it happens now. If I want it to be kept private, I don't tell him. And you thought I was going to say her. I don't tell him. I've got a male friend that way. I don't dare tell him stuff that I want private or has been told to me in confidence. Self-controlled conversation for the younger. That's a learned aspect. He also says, be chaste. That is pure in mind and heart motivation. Frankly, guys, keep it zipped and understand the heart motivation that goes with that. It's a change of mind and motivation, and it will affect your heart at the deepest level. And then he has an interesting phrase here that I know we're going to misappropriate. Keepers at home. Keepers at home, caring for the home. Oh, Mark, that's for the women. It doesn't say that. Careful, careful. It doesn't say that. Oh, but housework is for the women. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Do you know she needs some help? She needs some help. I was told a story about a man in the neighborhood, and he would sit on the porch and rock. He was from Ukraine, as it turned out to be. And he had struck up a conversation and a friendship with a young boy in the neighborhood. And the boy was in conversation with the older gentleman, telling him, because he'd met a girl in the neighborhood, and he fancied her. And the old Ukrainian man said, "Son, do you know the 3 sweetest words in the English language?" He said, "Oh, yes. It's I love you. Those are the 3 sweetest words." Oh, my. The old man shook his head. He said, No. The 3 words are these: can I help? And if you men that are watching find your wife sometime washing the dishes at the sink alone, you can tell her you love her. But you know what she wants to hear, and you know what will be effective? If you come up behind her and whisper in her ear, "Can I help?" You won't have to tell her you love her, because she will know it. When you say, "Can I help?" Can I help with the housework? Can I help with the dishes? You wash and I'll dry. She will know when you say, "I love you," you really mean it. Helping with the house is not feminine. It's for all of us. It's to contribute that which you can when you can. Keepers at home. So that's harder for maybe some of the young guys to learn, and it's in the younger category here. He uses the word good, and I chuckle a little bit because it's translated properly as kind. Be kind. That's a little harder for testosterone pumped up guys to be kind, because it can be mislabeled as kind of feminine and girly. I was interested as a linguist to find out the definition of the English word good, because good applies to so many, many things in our culture and in our language, from your health to the tires on your car to the way the job the plumber did. Good is very elastic. And I compiled a definition of good, and let me tell you, it was a full page of definition in all the different ways, from health to attitude to the weather. Good, in this case, is kind. Good can mean a lot of different things. Maybe I'll bring you that page one of these days, and we can go through what good means and laugh at how many ways it can be used in English. Prudence is mentioned here, and that's back to the self-discipline, and that's kind of where we started with discreet. Self-controlled conversation, and now he says prudence. Discipline yourself. If you're dependent on someone to discipline you, you just haven't grown up yet. Because part of making the transition through those difficult teenage years, I don't know that I would survive a second time. When you become an adult, you're self-disciplined. You're not dependent upon someone else to discipline you. If you remain undisciplined, you're going to stand before a judge, and he's going to put you in a place where you can think about it, maybe for a long, long time, because you're not self-disciplined. We need that from the younger ones. And then in verses 7 and 8, he turns his eyes toward the teachers, those who are the teachers. And there are many ways to teach, some in formal situations like a classroom or a Bible school, a university, or a Sunday school or Bible study in some fashion. But for all the different teachers of the different functions, he says, I need you to have pure motives. I need you to teach the truth with dignity. If you need to upgrade your language, if you need to learn some better English or whatever your native language is, learn some better presentation tools. Dignify your function. Don't be base, coarse, and common. Raise the average, my friends. The third thing is to teach sound doctrine. Sound doctrine, not things on the fringes, not things out on the margin, not things that could be interpreted. And we're going to criticize that in just a few minutes. But those three things: pure motive, dignity, and sound doctrine. Then he speaks in verses 9 and 10 to employees. Now, in the first century of the Roman Empire, 60% of the population were slaves. 60%. There were more slaves than there were non-slaves. Is that amazing? I mean, when you have 60% in a culture, it affects everything. Everything. And so I've put the word employees because that is an understanding that we have in our culture that is, I'll say, dynamically equivalent. And he says no disobedience. When you're an employee, it's your job to do what you're told. You've been hired to do a job, and if you've agreed for a certain price to do a certain job, it's not time to do Bible study. Oh, but that's when I get my best study and prayer in. You're not paid to do that. You're supposed to work and obey. And he says, no talking back. Oh my, how many of us are qualified to do that? Back talk. Sass, they call it in the South. Sass. Don't do that. Be respectful of the hierarchy here, that you are the servant for today, the employee, in the first century, the slave. And those that are your boss, you don't talk back to them. If they ask you a question, you can answer, of course. And then he says, isn't this interesting? No stealing. No stealing. Well, Walmart dials in 10% to their inventory estimates for what they call shrinkage. Now, there are things that are broken in shipment. There are things that are spoiled when they cut the box or the plastic with a razor blade knife. And sometimes there's some spoilage. There's some shrinkage. But you know what the bulk of the shrinkage is? Shoplifting. Stealing. Not just from the customers, but from the employees. And he says, if you're an employee, if you're a slave, no stealing. That's not doesn't belong to you. And then he uses a term in verse 7. I want to go back a couple of verses to a Greek word. It's T-U-P-O-S, tupos. And it means a pattern. A tupos is something that is used, and one of the common applications is this. It's used as a stamp to mint coins. And you've seen early coins that are of metal and they are irregular in shape. They don't have a nice cut and polished edge. It's kind of a glob of silver in many cases. But then there is an image and maybe some words that have been stamped on that piece of silver. That's a tupos. That's a pattern. That it has been stamped, it has been marked very specifically to where you can read the language, you can see the numbers, it might have a date of the mint, it might have the image of the emperor or the president in the middle of the coin. It has been stamped and marked. And he uses this Greek root word. It's used, translated to English as type. But it's not a style. It's an example. And he's saying, Titus, leave a mark on those that you teach. You see how important it is to have the proper calling, the proper profile, the proper attitude, the proper motivation of heart. Because as you come into a relationship where you are teaching people, you are stamping them with a hard instrument into soft metal. And it's going to leave an indelible mark. It can't be erased. It can't be forgotten. If they can forget what you taught the next day, you didn't mark them. You need to imprint them. Do that with sound doctrine. Do that with the power of the Holy Spirit as you present the gospel of Jesus Christ in its fullness and in its many aspects and applications. Mark the people that you teach. Let me tell you, you will mark them. And we want you to mark them in a good and positive way. I'm past the point. I'll just use myself as an example, and you'll forgive me for seeming egotistical. I'm past the point of needing people to like me. I don't really care anymore. I did at one point, but I outgrew that. But corresponsive with that, I don't really care about people who don't like me. If they disapprove, and I'm walking as I'm supposed to before God and doing what He's called me to do, they don't like it, I'm sorry, but I really am not motivated by that. But what I am concerned about is if people forget me, that I didn't make a mark, and they don't remember who I was, what I said, how I did it. I didn't leave a mark. Tupos. I want to mark people with a pattern. And some of you have been in meetings where I've reiterated this particular thing. I don't care if you like me, I don't care if you don't like me, but I'm here to change your life. That's my objective here in an hour. I want to change your life. I want to make a mark on you that you don't forget. And to put it in sounds like a negative, that you'll never recover from this hour. I don't want you to recover from this. The reason, verse 5 in chapter 2, that the practice of the Christian faith does not bear any reproach from me or my example. Paul says it in another way, in another place, that we have no hindrance to the gospel. If you need to change your clothing, if you need to dress up, if you need to dress down, if you need to get a haircut, if you need to get some dental work done, if you need to brush your teeth a little more often, if you need to take care of your hair, you need to remove all the hindrances from people having an excuse, from accepting the gospel message from you. Make the path smooth. If they're going to walk this way, pave it. Make it easy for people to accept you and what you say and the impact that you have made with your tupos, your mark upon them, your impact. Don't let any reproach creep into your example, to your personal life. It will affect people, and we want to leave the effect in the good fashion that the gospel will bring. Verses 11 through 15, the doctrine behind the adornment. Yes, we are going to arrange things in a proper fashion, but now underneath, the backstory is in verses 12 and 13, and he says this, leave ungodliness and worldly lusts. So, man, he's really talking to a group of bad sinners, isn't he? No, he's not. He's talking to Titus, the pastor, and his group of elders. He's talking to the believers that are on the island of Crete. He says, leave ungodliness. Oh, but there's none of that in my life. Well, I've spotted some right there. We got a little bit of pride showing, my friend. If you think you don't have anything, you need to look again. And worldly lusts, the things of the flesh, the things of the love of money, the desire to be popular or famous, and all the things that people give themselves to. He says, leave that. Just leave it. You don't have to have a special day of deliverance, of baptism. Just leave it. Leave it behind. The second thing, it says live. Live soberly, live righteously, and live godly. Live soberly, righteously, and live godly. Look for that blessed hope. Here's where we raise our sights, where we change the focus of our eyes, and we lift them up, and we look for that blessed hope. We are looking for the parting of the eastern sky any minute of any day, no matter what your chart may say. So if I read the prophetic material correctly, and if I interpret it in the right way, there won't be anybody's chart that's correct. Mark, are you sure? I'm positive. No man knows the day or the hour. Will we know the season? Yeah, we know the season. And what we are seeing right now in the world today could be the beginning of the end. Could be the beginning of the end. It's possible that Jesus could come. Oh, well, no, this has to happen, this has to happen. No, it doesn't. And other things can happen so quickly overnight that you wouldn't even know about it, and it would fit in the expectation. All are to be present in the here and now. The leaving, the living, and the looking forward. That's instructions for today. Not some pie in the sky, some future moment when we go, oh, well, someday I'll leave that worldly lust. No, let's just do that today, shall we? Verse 11 from the New American Standard phrases this way: the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men. I'll read it again. The grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men. Does that mean that everyone's going to be saved? No, that's not what it says. It says that God has provided, God has manifested, God has made available salvation for everyone, but it has to be accepted and believed. It has to be accepted. There are those, and I think it's a form of insanity, if you'll let me use that term, a form of insanity to look at what God has offered to us and say, no, thank you. I think it's unthinkable in the mind of God that anyone would turn down going to where Jesus lives. John 14. I'm going to build a place where you can live where I live. You can come sit next to me. You see, those who have turned it down, for the most part, I think they need to know a little more about it before they stay with that decision. They need to know more information. They need to be experiencing more love and compassion and peace and joy of the Holy Spirit in their life, and need and want and hunger for more, and realize I need to choose what God has chosen for me. Verse 11 could be stated this way: redeemed by grace, His lavish favor paid for my freedom. His lavish favor has paid for my freedom. In verse 12, we see that changed by grace is something that we highly value grace. We probably don't understand it at its depth, but at what level we do understand grace, it's not an excuse for poor behavior. Oh, God understands, and He will be graceful on this. Don't excuse your bad behavior, your disobedience, by leaning on a grace ticket that's been punched. Grace will change your attitude. Grace fully understood will change your ambition. And what you think is to be the focal point and the victories of your life, it will change your action and your behavior. If you understand grace beyond making it an excuse for your shortcomings and your intentional failures, you'll change your action. Grace is powerful, and it will come in and it will change you. In verse 13, he said, we are rewarded by grace. We have one hope. I do not hope in the coming election. I do not hope in a political party. I do not hope in this government. I don't hope in anything that exists coming out of this world. We have one hope, Paul says, and that is Jesus Christ is fully God and He is returning to earth. That is my one singular hope. Oh, I hope we win this election. Raise your sights, my friend. Raise your sights. Come up a level or two and put your hope in Jesus Christ. The only hope of the world is Jesus now and Jesus coming. Jesus now and Jesus coming. Nothing else is hopeful. Oh, I hope. Well, for most people, that just means they're wishing. I hope Santa Claus brings me a new bicycle. That's wishing. Santa Claus doesn't exist, even if you believe Jesus is Santa Claus. Some treat him that way. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Our hope is in Jesus Christ, His reality today in my life, and that He is coming again. And it's soon. Well, define soon, Mark. Well, He could come in the clouds at any moment, I believe. Or if He doesn't, and you carelessly walk across the street and the big red bus comes by, you get to go see Jesus today. And in fact, He's coming for you now. That can happen at any time to any of us. We don't know the number of our days. We don't know if this is our last day or not. I'm not being morose. I'm not being paranoid. I'm not being gloomy. We just don't know. We plan. I'll quote my father, my mentor and pastor for many years. He says, we plan as if Jesus is not coming for 500 years. We live as though He's coming today. And there's the dual difference. There's the understanding. Doesn't mean we don't plan. Doesn't mean we don't budget. Doesn't mean we don't pay rent, for next month or get ready and make plans for what our ministry is going to be as God guides us in what we are going to do. In verse 14, there is a goal that is listed here, and it has a bad meaning in English. The term is peculiar. Now, you know some peculiar people. They're odd. They're just kind of iffy. And I'm trying to be kind and still define. But in the Greek, it means a special people of God's own possession. A special people of God's own possession. He says we are to be peculiar. Peter writes of peculiar people. He's made us a peculiar people. We are God's special people of His possession. You'll find this in Deuteronomy chapter 14 as he talks about the people of the children of Israel, and it's also in Deuteronomy chapter 26. Peculiar people. It's a compliment. It is a distinction. It is a characteristic that we bear. The personal application, and I'll be very practical with you, I have yet to meet the perfect pastor. I've been in somewhere between 400 and 500 churches to speak. Not to attend, to speak. I've lost track of how many. I've not met a perfect pastor. I've met good pastors. I've met wonderful pastors. I've met anointed pastors. I've met obedient pastors. I've met powerful pastors. But I've not met a perfect pastor. And even when I look in the mirror, I'm not a perfect pastor either. Nor have I met the perfect Christian for that matter. We are each in a process, a series of changes by His planning, not mine, to become Christ-like in our actions, to become Christ-like in our character, and to become Christ-like in our motives. There's really the subterranean element where we need to be convinced when our motive is changed. When He doesn't, you see, the trappings, the bondage of religion by coercion can change your actions. I can change you. I can take a thief, a career criminal thief, take him down in the basement, and with 2 rolls of duct tape, I can guarantee he will never steal again. That's what religion does. It straps you down. It changes your behavior. If he's a cursing thief, I can fix that. I can put enough tape around his mouth, he will never curse again out loud. But you know the problem with religion and with duct tape? It doesn't change the heart. You see, this guy strapped in the chair is still a thief. I've only changed his outward action. I've not changed him. He's still a cursing thief. And we can become involved in religion, and we can look like a Christian, we can act like a Christian, we can hang around other posers and fool each other. And all we've done is get strapped into the chair and change our outward behavior, and our heart remain as dark as it ever was. Only the Holy Spirit, only the rejuvenation based on the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead can change your heart. And then we don't need the duct tape. Then we have the freedom. Then we are released to let our heart be expressed. Head, heart, hands, feet. And our behavior changes because our heart has changed our character. Our character changes our action changes our relationship, the effectiveness of our ministry is enhanced, and the glory goes to God because He's the one that changes our heart. Life is not a list of multiple choice options, but an understanding of God working in your life and why. Why is He doing this? You may refer to Romans chapter 8, verse 28, may be one of your favorites. All things work together for good. And if you stop right there with your quotation, it is a lie. All things do not work together for good. And many secular people, many unbelievers, many philosophers, many non-saved pastors will make that quotation. All things work together for good. No, they don't. Finish the verse, my friend. For those who love God and are called according to His purpose. And His purpose is in verse 29, of course, and that is to change you into the likeness of Jesus Christ as fast as you will let Him. As fast as you will let Him. That's the purpose. That's the will of God, that you be changed from who you are to someone else. He wants to replicate the characteristics, the heart, the compassion, the love, the peace, the joy of Jesus Christ in your life. And then we can quote, all things are working together for my long-term good as I love God fully and I am called according to the purpose that He has for my life. And I understand what He is doing in my life, and I understand why. I understand why. In verse 15, the word to Titus is threefold: proclaim, encourage, and reprove. Some is done by the spoken word, but much of our preaching and teaching is done by the demonstration of our real life in situations of what demonstrates Jesus Christ has done in us to change us. An old phrase that I'll borrow, it's not mine, but it's a good one. What you do speaks so loud, I cannot hear what you say. What you do speaks so loud, I cannot hear what you say. People believe what you do, what you're doing with your hands and feet. You see, this is not a planned exhibition. It's not showing off, but the actions and the conversations that occur in an ongoing fashion in our lives are convincing to other people. They're convincing about Jesus. We're not trying to convince them to our way of thinking. We're trying to convince them to Jesus' way of thinking. Don't try to determine God's way in order that you can control and plan it. but submit to his development of you in his timing, in his way, and in his method. Paul has some concerns and the resulting emphasis in the next section. Faith and belief in Jesus Christ is so foundational, and he reiterates this again. When Paul repeats things, it's got to be important. He doesn't tend to repeat himself. And then, of course, flowing out of that, number 2 is a changed life that demonstrates faith. So first we have faith and belief in Jesus Christ, and second, a changed life that demonstrates faith. So here's the blend of that. If number 1 exists, number 2 will follow. Number 2 must follow. If number 2 is absent, you know why? Number 1 doesn't exist. There's your foundation. Number 1, faith and belief in Jesus Christ. 2, a changed life that demonstrates faith. In Titus chapter 3, he blends the concept of good works into the everyday life of every believer. You've followed the instructions in a cooking situation, in a recipe direction, when you blend something together, whether it's in an electric mixer or whether it's a whisk by hand. We are faced with this dilemma. We are in the world, but not of the world. And there is a blending that occurs that doesn't intend to change us to the world, but it requires the proper interaction with people around us that are not Christians. And in some cases, like if you stir something together that is 2 different colors, you see the streaking as you stir. It's there, it's blended, but it's not integrated. It's part of the mix, but it's different. And we are like that. We are blended into the world, but we don't become the world because of our presence or our interaction. We don't believe in the monastery nunnery approach, where we run to the mountaintop and remove ourselves from every worldly influence whatsoever. I think that's a trick from the enemy that entered in the first century, and people began to do that. They began to run to the mountaintop and remove themselves from any kind of worldly influence or temptation. Think for a moment, just a moment, of what would have happened to the early church and its explosive growth had the apostles and the 500 believers that we know about, and the 120 from Acts chapter 2, went to the mountaintop and took a vow of silence. Tell me about missions. Tell me about evangelism. Tell me about the spread of the gospel throughout the world. What would have happened? Nothing. We have to have contact. We must have contact. It's imperative that we are in the world, but we are not of the world, and we understand this interaction. So he's preparing us for good works in chapter 3, and the characteristics of Christians, and this is the first one he lists in chapter 3, verse 1, that we are good citizens, not lawbreakers. Whatever country you're in, whatever government you're under. Now please understand, that's when you're in a free enterprise system, that you are have a democratically formed republic, and we have the enjoyment of the freedoms that we have in the United States. He's talking to people that are in the Roman Empire that are systemically being resisted and killed. And he's saying, obey the law. That's a characteristic of your Christian faith. Obedience to the law, not disobedience. We must be prepared for doing good works, and this is a demonstration of the work of salvation in our life that has already occurred. It's already occurred. It may not all be showing, and that's normal. But there is a development and a progress that we are experiencing where the treasure of the salvation of God that has been deposited within us begins to come to the surface and demonstrate on the outside, first to us, our family, and to those that we know. How can I prepare my life for good works? Verse 2 says this, no slanderous talk. Do you know how easy it is to carry tales? Do you know how easy it is to be a backbiter? Do you know how easy it is to slander someone because you have figured out from some microscopic information their whole psychological profile? You don't know. Cut off the slanderous talk. Identify it. Well, you know, it's so easy to identify slanderous talk in another person. Spend some time in the mirror with a mirror, my friend. Spend some time looking into these eyes and say, son, you got to shape it up. You got to be better. You got to act better. You got to do. He lists also no aggressiveness or prone to fighting. We don't settle things by physical violence. We don't settle arguments this way. We're not going to punch each other. Temper under control, being gentle and considerate is not weak. Gentle and consideration is a show of strength. You see, the weak people demand that everybody agree with them. Did you know that? That's a sign of weakness. It's a sign of insecurity. It's a sign that I'm not sure about my position, and so if everybody agrees with me, I'll be completely reinforced, and I'll be shown as weak. He says, be strong, but be under control. And then the last one he lists, meekness and humility. You see, Paul is not one that believes that he is a lowly worm. Paul's got a pretty good sized ego. He wouldn't have been able to accomplish what he did without some interesting internal drive. But he also said, I beat myself up daily. Why? Because he's got such a massive ego that he has to remember not how small we are, but how big God is. That's where I believe true humility is developed. Not you making yourself small, small, small and unimportant and without meaning, but when you begin to comprehend the grandeur and the greatness and the vastness of God, now some humility will come to you. You realize how big he is, and you can deal with the day. To whom should I act this way? Well, he says to all. To all people, you should act this way. Not just the select brothers and sisters. I remember a story, and maybe you've been in this situation at your workplace, where some people are cursing, swearing, using foul language. And you walk into the room, and someone begins to apologize. They apologize for their language. Or they insult a whole country and say, pardon my French. That ain't French. That's just bad language. But here, one man that I read about responded this way. He says, no, don't apologize. I'm the one that's different. You're not. I'm the one that's different. You don't owe me an apology. Boy, that puts shoes on the other feet, doesn't it? I'm the one that's different. I'm glad that my reputation affects people and their language and their conversation. I'm glad for that. But I hope that I have more than that. Hope that I have more than just, the profile and the reputation that precedes me. Grace is related to our good works. Verses 3 through 7 interestingly enough, Paul says, don't be overly critical of your pagan friends. Isn't that easy to do? Don't be overly critical of your pagan friends. You have pagan friends. I hope you do. I hope you haven't insulated yourself so much that every person you know is a Christian believer. That's tragic. Oh, that's wonderful. I work for a Christian company. All the Christians are in the office or in the warehouse. I'm surrounded by Christians in my family, at family gatherings. I'm surrounded by Christians at church. How tragic. You don't have any contact with an unbeliever? Where's your personal evangelism? Where's your mission field? You need contact with pagans. Why? To win them over. This is how we spread, not by insulating ourselves, by hiding in Christian communities or Christian communes somewhere. Don't be overly critical. Just remember what you were before you came to Jesus Christ. Yeah. Either you were like that or worse. Or worse. And those that you encountered as an unbeliever that had the peace of God, that had the love of God, that had His Spirit resting upon them were so different than you. And you knew it. You knew it. You knew you were right, but there's something special about those people. As a result, we don't become proud of who we are, but we become supremely grateful to God for what He has done in us. It sounds so brutal when we go back to this simple verse where Jesus says, without me, you are nothing. You are nothing. That just sounds mean. But it's not. It's a realization that we are the empty vessel and He can fill it. He can fill that empty vessel with the goodness of heaven, the goodness of His character, the goodness of His grace, the characteristics that He has. He shares with us without losing any. Isn't that amazing? He shares His characteristics with us and causes us to be different. And what we are, and all we are in Him, is it. We're nothing more than that. We are what He has made us. And I don't supplement by my athleticism, by my beauty or handsomeness, by my education, by my training. I don't supplement what God has done. Even those things are gifts that He has placed within me for a purpose. In verse 5, Paul says He saved us. We did not save ourselves. And that speaks certainly to the false teachers of Crete. You're not saving yourself by observing the feasts, the fasts, and the offerings of the Old Testament. You are not saving yourself by doing the right thing every time in the flesh. He saved us. This concept is equivalent to the Old Testament Hebrew word hesed, H-E-S-E-D. If you'd look that up, some definition, you'd be blessed in an amazing fashion. It's translated to English, mostly in the Psalms, as loving kindness, one word. And the first time you see that, you go, oh, well, the printer's made a mistake there. There should be a space. Hesed does not translate. It is a powerful force of loving kindness that goes beyond. There is a depth, there is a power, there is something that happens within us as God comes upon us in loving kindness, in hesed, and it changes us. It's a pressure that He bestows upon us. Loving kindness scratches the surface for translation. It's the best the English translators could do because the English is so limited and the Hebrew is so descriptive. It just doesn't translate. Please look up Hesed, and you'll be blessed to see what God does with a power of coming over you with loving kindness to catch up with you and bestow His Hesed upon you. The result is a new relationship with God through His grace, and it's been just simply given to us. We didn't earn it. We didn't deserve it. He shouldn't give it to us, but He is motivated by that agape first love to do something for people. He wants us in His family. He wants us in that relationship. The famous evangelist George Whitefield, a couple hundred years ago, I don't know the exact date. This phrase has been misused. Sometimes when we see a person begging, a person that's maybe got one of those signs in a wheelchair, and we feel sorry for them, and we use the phrase, "But for the grace of God go I." That was first used by George Whitefield on the streets of London, England, as he watched a man who was being marched to the gallows. He was going to be hung within a few minutes. And George, the famous evangelist, the great revivalist, the great man of God, the great sermon writer, said, "There, right there, I'm not poor, I'm not unhealthy, I'm not in a wheelchair. There on the way to the gallows, except for the grace of God. I'm dead. I'm a dead man and deserve it. No unfair prosecution. No false evidence from the police. I did it. I deserve it. There's where I would be without the grace of God." The summary: the sins of the past are forgiven, my friend. What sins, God would say? He has the ability to forget. I remember being, I think about in the 3rd grade, and I was a problem child. They thought so. And I remember the terror that came upon me when they said, "We're going to put this on your permanent record." I was scared. Oh my goodness. No matter where I go for school, no matter what university I attend, no matter what job I apply for, they're going to turn the page and go, "Let's see, Mark, I think in the 3rd grade you were a bad boy." Your permanent record. Permanent came real to me about the 3rd grade. And I began to understand, like, oh no. And when I was taught that God expunges the record, and He forgives and He forgets like no person you have ever met in your entire life, including you, we can't forget. One man I heard say this: "Yeah, we buried the hatchet, but we left the handle sticking out." Yeah. But God has forgotten. He destroyed our permanent record from the 3rd grade, and I am so happy about that. The present life is changed by Jesus Christ, dynamically. Not just back in 1942 when you became a Christian, but today. Today, when He anointed you for the day to walk, to live, to work, to learn, to interact with people, to go to the market, to buy some fish, to buy some rice, to eat your food, to fellowship with people, wherever you may go. He has changed your life today, and we, as a result, have a hope for a future with Him. There is no hope without Jesus. Back to that thought. In verses 8 through 11, Paul wants us to concentrate upon a life of good works, properly motivated, properly reborn again. He's not doing it backwards like the world does. The world believes that if they do enough good works, that goodness will soak into their evil heart and they will be seen and be changed into a good person. if you do enough good works, if you give enough money to the foundation, if you support enough veterans, are you with me? If you do a lot of good works, oh my, you must be a good person. And they believe it happens, that it migrates, that goodness migrates and changes you internally. And you play along like it happened. But it's just a play. You see, Paul has taught that we get the heart change, we get the motive change, we get the character change. We develop the inner spiritual person, and as a result of that, good works flow out. The compassion comes out. The things that we do for others and with others as a result of the change internally. So verse 8 says, be careful. Now that could imply maybe a little touch of paranoia. Be careful, you might slip and fall. No, that's not what it means. Let me switch that word around. Be full of care. Oh, that feels different, doesn't it? Be full of care, be concentrated in your mental mode like an athlete in training. You see, they're training. They're giving up social interaction. They're giving up their favorite food. You know, if you're training for the Olympics, you don't eat ice cream. Right? You give it up. You're focused on something that is very important, and he appeals to us for thoughtful consideration and careful planning. Mark, but don't good things just flow from us automatically? No, they don't. They flow because we have trusted in God for salvation. We allow the change that has happened to us on the inside to have a demonstration on the outside. Our actions change. It's not just automatic. You don't just sit back in your big chair and relax and things just flow out of you. You have to be a participant. You got to be active in this and allow them to flow. Because if you're idle, things stop. Things stop. You're a participant in this process. But avoid, he said in verse 9, we can be easily sidetracked by divisive issues and the many monumental wasters of time and effort. We got to get more efficient. Avoid spending hours and hours discussing a doctrinal application that isn't practical, that doesn't conclude with a challenge to action. Remember, just talking about theological issues does not make you spiritually stronger. Just talking about it. And of course, my favorite Old Testament waste of time from the Old Testament, the women would take care of the household and the children, and the men would do something so very important. They would meet down at the gates of the city and they would debate theology all day. You know, real heavy and weighty things. And they would discuss things. And one of the things was, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? Well, if you go conservative, then you're limiting the power of God. If you go too liberal, it becomes obviously impractical. And you discuss this important point all day long with no application or conclusion, except we'll talk about this tomorrow. And you've wasted a whole day. And some of these things, if you do come to a conclusion, if you come to a place where you do have a joint agreement and you have a conclusion, so what? What if you come to a number of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? So what? How does it impact and affect your life? How does it change your ministry? How does it enhance what you're doing to impact another person's life as a tupos? It doesn't. It just simply wastes your time and your effort. What if? Well, minimize those distractions and avoid those issues that cause divisions, and avoid the people that cause division. I didn't say that. Paul did. Avoid things that cause division and the people that do it. Doesn't say call them names. Doesn't say put it in the bulletin. It doesn't say speak bad things about them to your closest of friends. It just says avoid them. That's all you need to do. Just avoid the people that cause division, because you're not one of them. You are an edifier. You are building the wall with Nehemiah, in effect. You're building, not dividing. Our politics, our culture right now is in such a hyperactive, dividing mode. It's just hard to keep up with. I'll just throw one bone in. They've divided us by gender. I heard a leading Bible teacher, I won't mention him because of being recorded, a leading Bible teacher say, in response to being asked, well, what about this gender issue? How many genders really are there? Some say 128, some say 256, some say it's fluid, some say it's changeable hour by hour. And he said, with what they have explained to me, I now understand there are 8 billion genders, one for every person in the world. Because everybody's different. Everybody feels different. Well, the insanity is obvious. And he just took it to the next level. Let's just go ahead and make it 8 billion. Quit arguing about how many hundred there are. 8 billion genders. There you go. Everybody's got their own. Please, those that divide, avoid them. Don't waste your day arguing with them. Because you won't get anywhere except they'll put you in the trash can. That's what they'll do. And you've wasted your time with no accomplishment whatsoever. Verse 10 for troublemakers. The rebellious, those who cause division. Here's the practical advice from Paul the Apostle. He the boss. Okay? For practical matters in church administration, give them 1 or 2 warnings with proper encouragement. And if they continue, listen carefully, if they continue in this sin, then you remove them from the local church and you don't permit them to return. Mark, we're trying to grow our church. Oh yeah, I remember the verse. Go into all the world and build a big church. I quoted that the other day at dinner, and the man sitting across from me, a missionary type, looked at me serious. He said, it doesn't say that. He knew. I knew he knew. He knew I knew. It doesn't say that. Go into all the world and build a big church. There are some people, Paul says, you warn them, you encourage them, and then you separate them. Say, Mark, I've never seen that. I know. And I'm sad for you. I'm sad for you. Because if you witness that happening, you'll be on notice. My friend, you will be on notice. Whoa, these people mean business. Where'd you get your marching orders? Paul the Apostle. Oh, but. No, you would like to keep those troublemakers in your group and continue the sin and the negative effect upon. You're going to grow a church with these people? I'll tell you what, we'll just make you a deal. We'll send all of them over to you. And you're going to build the biggest monstrosity of a church that has ever existed. A church of rebels, disobedient, and troublemakers. Boy, that really sounds good to me for you to do. We don't need them. We don't need them. Don't be one of them. That's the good point. The proper encouragement is there. So in verses 12 through 15, and I'll close for tonight, the good habits of Christian conduct. In verse 14, he says, learn, develop good habits. It's easy to develop good habits in other people. Develop in your own. Develop things in your own life. Self-discipline has been a theme throughout the book of Titus. Self-discipline. First, the characteristics that Paul insists on, and here's where we start. The motivation of heart, the characteristics that he has listed specifically, and then the action. Somebody must have said, well, what action would you suggest? Like what? He said, I'll give you one example, and you'll see it here. Support yourself and the traveling preachers. And then Paul closes with a word to Titus and a word to you and I. Grace to you. Grace to you. God bless you tonight. Thank you for being with us. We hope to see you again. Hope you will join us again as we go next to 2 Timothy and the final letter that Paul has penned. God bless you tonight. Thanks again.
This program has been produced by A Life Devoted to Ministry, LTD Production, and is home of training trainers to lead. We hope you enjoyed this program. For more information or to support our ministry, please visit ldtms.org.